So we're here to solve this inverse LITS, which is a somewhat counterintuitive style, but one we featured before in the Puzzle Masters workshop. We have to mark 4 connected cells in each of these regions, unlike a standard LITS where, for instance, you can always mark these 2 in a P pentomino. Since we can actually put an O tetromino in the unshaded space, we only know these cells, but there are some cells we can't reach into. We can't reach into this, so this has to be shaded. If this were shaded, it would get isolated, so this can't be shaded. With this being an L, this being shaded would put another L near it, so this has to be unmarked. This would be isolated, this would be isolated, so I think we've got an option of 2 cells here. One of the regions that's most limiting is probably the space where we've got a 2x2 box and a 2x2 box, but if we don't mark off a cell from each of these, we would form an invalid LITS pattern. So we mark this into the grid, that puts this in. We need to get over to this cell to break up this potential 2x2 box, but that's going to now limit this shuriken to these 3 cells and then either an L or an S. The L is actually going to put some constraints up above. It would force this pattern, so this connects sort of through here, but it doesn't connect up and out. And if this were the S, it's forced to connect up and out using these. So it looks like in both of those scenarios, this cell is always shaded. I think you can see that in other ways. If this were marked this way, you would now have to put this in and get another L. So this is always marked unshaded. We've got potentially a route where we come up this end. So if this isn't used, we do have to come up this side, and coming around this side, we'll have to take at least one of these cells in this region. That's going to make it so that we have to sort of come up this path, and coming up this path, we're going to have the cell come through. So we're going to have to go all the way around this corner to the top. This now is an I. We've got to reach down here to not avoid a 2x2 cell, but I would put another I or potentially an L. So this shape will always touch this shape, this shape. So connectivity around this edge looks really, really constrained. The general thing I'm seeing is that we can actually say that this shape that has an L forcing down here is not any good. So this T shape looks okay. That puts in this, gets a little more pattern over here. The shuriken at the start have a constraint that looks like they always take at least 2 cells in green, so around this 2x2 square. And so a cell like this looks like it could be pretty constrained. If this is unshaded, then this coming up is unshaded, and we will have to take one of these cells, and that means we'll connect into this cell, and connecting to that, we're going to make an L by picking these 3 in a row, and that L is going to touch the L down here. So this will be a shaded cell. If this is marked off, then again, for connectivity, we do this, but now we don't even form a properly shaded, unshaded tetromino of any size. So this has to be shaded diagonally then across the center, because again, 2 of these at least are going to be part of this group. This has to be marked in. If I take all of these, I can't get into this shape, so I have to take at least one more out. And in doing that, we'll see that this has to come over here to be connected. So we've got some more shape now coming through this part of the grid. I think there's some stuff around the shuriken when we have a shaded cell like here. Like if I take this cell, I always have to then shade the cell right next to it because I can't get a single unshaded cell in a group. And one reason that's important is around this cell, we have exactly one way to not take this L and S shape. So this is an L, this is an S, this is an L, this is an L. The only one that works is this T shape. And so if this is actually shaded, I'm forced to come over and take this, but that makes an L or an S. So this is always an unshaded cell. That doesn't immediately give me a lot more, but it's a start. And I think it can probably work it into these cells in some way, in that, for instance, if this is shaded, this is unshaded. And maybe it's going to come from thinking through how do we get through this channel in an effective way. If this is shaded and this is shaded, then we're going to have to come up here and we're forming another L shape, and that's touching this L shape. So the cell looks particularly bad. We've got to come through this channel. These being shaded does mean we have to take this opposite one. These 3 mean I can't reach over to this one, but that means that comes back. These get marked in. These are done. These are done. If I don't take this cell, I get an L near an L, so this is unshaded. I think one constraint we're going to see is if I sort of block off this cell, then this comes down here, but I now isolate the bottom of the grid. So I can't leave that unshaded. This has to be shaded. That means this comes up. And same constraint here. If I take this cell, I now am going to have to come down here, but we'll block off the top. So I have to come in and shade this. That means these are unshaded. I come up here in black. If I don't take this cell as unshaded, I would form an L near an L. So I do take this, and that puts these in, puts this in. I have to take at least one of these around here as unshaded, but if I start from here, I would have to form this pattern to keep a 2x2 square from forming. So this looks like it is shaded all the time. If I take this cell, so that these like 2x2 blocks are going to look like they're going to be pretty forcing. If I take this box, again, this is near a shuriken, so this always has to come up. I'd be forced to do this, but that's going to isolate the bottom. So this is marked off. I've got some knowledge here, and I actually can't have these be anything but shaded cells, or I'd have an I near an I. I do want to still make the top of this grid work, and so perhaps this is a good time to think about what it would look like if we actually had a white or a shaded block around here. Like if I had these cells coming through to here, I would have to have at least this cell unshaded, this cell unshaded. That comes over here and starts to move this group in for connectivity, so I would have an issue. So I can't comfortably start from here with this being shaded, so I can start with this being unshaded. This set does not want to join to this L, and we need connectivity, so this comes here. This forms an I. The I doesn't want to touch this I, and all these cells have to be shaded up top. I've got these 7 cells, but it's not going to form this I or this I. This has to form an L. Now I'm trying to see, we still have some connectivity sort of through this end. I can't have all these shaded, so I have to take this cell, but that means this cell will be shaded on the other end. If these are connected to the rest, they're not coming through this channel, they gotta come through this channel, which is the only route for them. That puts in this shaded group. All this is unshaded, this is now forced. These two mean that I at least have to take this as an unshaded cell. This is completing the L. If this comes over here, 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 we have 4 unshaded, but the groups don't connect. So this is unshaded, unshaded, and instead this shading puts everything together. So pretty tough puzzle to work through. There might have been some other deductions around the shuriken patterns in the middle, but I think some of the most forcing constraints, like getting connectivity around the side of the grid, getting connectivity through the center, avoiding this L, and other patterns like that, got me through to my finish of the grid. So hopefully you got something from this video, and if you had other approaches to this puzzle, please add them to the comments. Otherwise, thank you, and we'll see you again soon.